Just a reminder, you can catch me recording this podcast live on AMP. AMP is a new live radio app that lets you call in and chat with me in person while recording. Get the app on Apple's App Store and make sure you follow me at John Middlekauff to get notified when I go live. What is going on, everybody? John Middlekauff, GoLow Pod. Make sure you go subscribe wherever you may listen. It's on the 3 and Out podcast feed. Me, John Middlekauff. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you hammer that subscription button. Subscribe to the Volumes YouTube page. Put a like, hammer the like button. Leave a comment below as well. As you can see behind me, we got some swag. Go to thevolume.com. Search the merch. We got GoLow merch. We got hats. We got polos. The Volume did a little rebrand. The hat looks sharp. I recommend it. Thevolume.com and search merch. We got a lot going on golf-wise. There was a congressional Senate hearing with the PGA Tour today. We will go over some of that. Rickie Fowler, since I've talked last, won. And just an incredible story. And then there's a shooting star, and he goes by the name Ludvig, who is coming, and he's coming fast. So we will dive into a lot of golf coming up. But first, I need you to go to your smartphone, and I need you to download the Gametime app. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in America. Do you want to go to any sort of sporting event, college or pro? Do you want to go to a concert? Do you want to go to a comedy show? I've done it. I've gone to concerts. I've gone to sporting events on these guys because I downloaded the Gametime app. And when I did it, I used the promo code GOLOW, GOLOW, and I got $20 off. It's very easy to do. Get out of the house, go do something, take a friend, get a little discount, and they have the best, most competitive prices of all the ticketing apps. Can't recommend them enough. They're the official ticketing app of the show for a reason. We use them, we swear by them, and you guys use them. So promo code GOLOW, hammer that one, and enjoy yourself. Let's start with what we witnessed today. And I got to be honest, I lasted less than 5 minutes. I can't take any time when the private sector, whether it's any sort of business, tech business, you name it, let alone a sports league, is summoned in front of Congress because nothing ever happens. It's always a time for these politicians to grandstand, to go viral on social media, while the ultimate result equals nothing. And today, that couldn't have been any more on display. I went to YouTube and I typed in just PGA Tour versus the U.S. government. And there was a clip from the Golf Channel of Rich Lerner and one of NBC's political reporters. And I thought he summed it up best. Like, regardless of everything we witnessed, this committee can't do anything to stop this merger, this agreement. So for as much as the talk and the screaming and the grandstanding, they cannot stop this from happening. And they're not going to. Why? The U.S. government is balls deep with Saudi Arabia and the PIF and MBS. That's not an opinion. That's a fact. We all can have our independent views of these guys, of how uncomfortable it makes us. But the fact is that our country is close allies with them. And now golf is clearly headed toward becoming business partners with them. And we have talked ad nauseum how this happened. The PGA Tour could never financially afford to keep going at the route they were going. For as cool as it's been for Keegan Bradley and Wyndham Clark and some of these guys to win these elevated events and make close to $4 million, that was $4 million. It's not really real. They had to take it out of their savings account to be able to fund this. It's not like their sponsors and the television gave them more money. I mean, they did get a new television deal a couple years ago, but it would not have equaled these purses, these prizes, regardless of what Phil Mickelson said. This business model was fabricated because of what LIV was doing. And they have an unlimited amount of money. They have trillions of dollars in untapped resources, let alone the $600-700 billion they have. So now, did PIF and LIV, it's not really PIF, LIV was created because of PIF and Yasser. Was their end game to get involved with the PGA Tour? It clearly feels like that. Did the PGA Tour ultimately years ago want to do business with the Saudis? Probably not. But I would imagine for the last year, they realized we got a major problem on our hands. And it led to today going in front of Congress where Jay Monahan, the commissioner, who is on, sick leave, who's coming back in a week, was not present. No one from the PIF or the Saudis or LIV was present. They sent out Jimmy Dunn, a rich, successful guy who ironically was his, financial company back in the day was involved in 9/11, and a bunch of his friends and business partners died, and the CFO. And they just screamed at him, or some of them did. Some of them defended how stupid this is. It's not the government's job to get, in front of the private sector in matters like this. I personally just fall under the category of these subcommittees are such a waste of time. Those of us in the private sector cannot relate to most of this stuff. We really can't, regardless of what side of the aisle you fall in. Every single subcommittee, when they get these hearings in front of Congress, feel like the same thing. It's also hypocritical. It's also selfish on the individual who's talking, basically to his constituents, how much he pretends to care, even though I never believe that he does. And it's not going to stop this inevitable, whether we want to call it a merger, whether we call it the future of golf, I don't know. Am I comfortable with the Saudis running the PGA Tour? Probably not, but I have no control over this. And everyone keeps saying they don't control it. They don't control it. Bullshit. Anytime you are the biggest funder, you are in control. Where is the money coming from? Who is funding your endeavors? Because it's clearly not RBC Heritage, right? Or you name the sponsor, Waste Management. PIF has more money in their couch cushions than those people could ever give the PGA Tour over 10, 20 years. It's not a fair fight. So now that we see, I don't want to say the light at the end of the tunnel, because there is still a lot to be figured out. Will LIV survive? What's going to happen to Greg Norman? What is Jay Monahan's role? How do you integrate these guys back? Do we separate it for a while? No one knows, because there's not a concrete agreement. But you can't watch today or follow today and take it seriously. I thought today, in the grand scheme of things, was completely irrelevant. Like, it did not matter at all. Once you find out they can't do anything to stop any of this, what is the point of any of it? It's why, listen, I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist here, but did Jay kind of go on a leave knowing that he could avoid today? Clearly, Yasser's like, I got a scheduling conflict. Like, bro, you can do whatever you want. Like, you're never talking in front of the U.S. government, because you talk to them behind the cameras when the microphones are off. That's when you guys communicate and get things done. And you guys ultimately, sounds weird, but it's a fact, they're allies. And today it's the never-ending saga. It kind of is more of a reflection on society and where we are as a country when it comes to the government than it is with the business world. Now, there were some interesting things to come out, because text messages were shown, emails were shown, I guess, through the WhatsApp of Jimmy Dunn and Yasser. And there are a lot of asks on both sides. One thing I find funny is Yasser wants to be a member at Augusta, and everyone on social media is making fun of him. Like, of course you asked to become a member of Augusta. Who wouldn't if they thought they had an opportunity? I think it's probably a little more serious than him just throwing that out there. And I also think a lot of people like Augusta's never letting him in. Are we sure? You don't think they have some members that would, like to be hand in hand with that guy? Would like to do some business with the fund? I would imagine they do. I would say that Yasser becoming a member at Augusta National is not as crazy as everyone thinks it sounds. Now, the other thing that came out is clearly the PGA Tour and the powers that be, and they're led by, Jay, Tiger, Jimmy Dunn, Rory, want Greg Norman gone. And there is a lot of buzz that, like, it's going to happen. Now, we'll see. There are a lot of moving parts, but I think it's pretty clear that Greg Norman's time involved, if this connection or when this connection and merger, whatever it's the official term, goes through, is going to come to an end pretty fast. Now, one thing I thought was pretty funny, is one of the things LIV and the PIF was asking for was to keep LIV going, play like 10 events, and give Rory a team and give Tiger a team, which would mandate they play in the 10 events. Tiger Woods cannot make it through half the majors. He can barely make it when he shows up at Augusta or at the PGA Championship, or I don't think he's played the U.S. Open the last couple of years. He can barely make it to Saturday, even if he makes the cut. I'm not talking about the golf swing and putting the ball in the hole. I'm literally talking about just walking down the course. And this is a guy who is one of the most prideful individuals in the history of any activity. And we know he is not going to take a cart, number one. And two, wants no part of your event. And he can't be bought. Why? He's so freaking rich. And part of being that rich is being able to say no. So that one was funny to me. I'm not ever going to say, like, never say never. You know, if somehow the LIV survives and they do some integration and they give some guys non-Tiger, but like a Rahm, a Rory, a team, I would say that would potentially be in play. I would also say if Rory McIlroy is just the leader of whatever the hell they call his team, be a tough look for the guy. And I understand this was out of his control. This was not his idea. Well, I don't know, man. You talk about like Victor Wembanyama when his security guard slapped Britney Spears. That's just something that's going to live with you for a long period of time. Anytime you get dunked on, anytime people are making fun of you, Britney Spears and some of her lyrics will be involved. I do think Rory said a lot of things, and I respect what he said at the time. But if he eventually is the captain, is an equitable owner in a team, it'd just be a tough look. Really no way around it. And then the other kind of just big wild card is Jay Monahan. Clearly, I think a lot of players were taken aback by this when this was announced. Now, they were the ones directly benefiting from, it's not fake money because it was real money, but it wasn't sustainable money. So it's like you can't totally be mad where the reason that Jay had to put more money on the table, even if it was from some account that they ideally didn't want to use, was because he was trying to, make the PGA Tour survive, make what these guys were involved in and took pride in survivable. Because if he didn't, they were going to continue to lose people, and that was not a sustainable way to operate. The tour is not the NFL. You can't just, if Micah Parsons and Nick Bosa and 3 other players get hurt by week 2, the NFL keeps on rolling. PGA Tour, I take away 3 or 4 more stars, we might as well shut down shop because they'd have a major, major problem on their hand. But when he comes back, is he just full on rocking and rolling? What is his interaction with the core top players? Is it forgivable? Does money basically just figure everything out eventually? Because that's what ultimately this feels like, separate from the dog and pony show of Congress, that just money trumps the day for everything. And it usually does. And listen, I'm not naive. I'm as pro-business as anyone you'll ever hear talk. But it's just kind of crazy the whole way this is played out. And, it just shows you that the PIF and the Saudis' money can just get them in a lot of doors. And there's a lot of speculation that they're not going to stop at the PGA Tour. I've been saying this for a while. PIF, Yasser, and the Las Vegas Raiders, I got that one circled from a mile away. Let's get into something a little more positive. Speaking of LIV, though, this guy had fallen on really hard times. And he was playing very, very poorly relative to his standard. Now, he had never won a major, and people often said, Rickie actually hasn't won that much, but he had finished top 3 in every single major. He had finished top 2 in several of the same majors. He had been one of the most competitive players for a 5 or 6 year span, an elite blue chipper who was a Ryder Cupper, who was a President's Cupper, and really, beside Tiger and Phil, was one of the faces of the game. Was more famous than Rory or Spieth. I mean, Rickie Fowler was, one of the pillars of the tour. And just a year ago, he was not even qualifying for the U.S. Open. And to me, he was a guy that had LIV written all over him. He was already rich. He'd already accomplished a lot. It would have been easy to just say, screw it. I'll go play a little bit. I'll take my $150 million. I'm over 30 years old. I got a family now. What am I doing this for? And he took the opposite tactic. He not only stayed and pledged his loyalty and went to that meeting with Tiger, he got back with Butch Harmon. Many would consider one of the best teachers in the history of the sport. And he grinded, and he grinded, and he grinded. And now he's a top 25 player in the world. I think he's officially 21st. Say what you want about the FedEx Cup. It does prove over a long period of time how you've played over a season. He has 8 top 10 finishes. And him winning about a couple weeks ago now was just pretty awesome to watch. You talk about a guy that I always respect people once they've accomplished a lot, especially financially, whether you're 35 years old or 70 years old, how do you continue to maintain a drive to get back, to have more success when money doesn't matter anymore, when you're basically rich enough where everything is free? And Rickie, beside Tiger and Phil, some of these LIV guys now with Dustin Johnson and Bryson, but non-LIV guys beside Tiger and Phil, he's probably one of the richest guys, if not the richest guys, right there with Rory or Spieth in the history of the sport. And he didn't leave. And watching him have success this year, I saw Butch Harmon. He was on with Colt and Sleaze on PGA Tour Radio. He said, listen, I've coached a lot of major championship winners. This is one of my sweetest because of how much it meant and how cool it was to watch a guy go from basically the sewer, the outhouse, back to the penthouse. And he was close. The other thing is, the guy could have won the U.S. Open in the final group, the favored. I guess he wasn't technically the favorite because Rory was to start that day on Sunday, but just kind of played like shit. I thought it was his tournament to win. I wasn't confident that he was going to win on that Sunday, but I usually thought he could have. And then the round happened, and it kind of unraveled on him. But to just keep battling the following week and then to win 2 weeks later is just, I get a lot of respect for Rickie. Everyone that I've ever met that knows him, been around him, love the guy, say he's just a high character, high quality individual. The tour has always hung their hat on how he treats kids, on how he acts, on his professionalism, on how classy he is. He's kind of cool. He's just someone that's just like, God, I'd be friends with Rickie Fowler. Comes from pretty humble beginnings in Southern California, started as wanted to be a motorcycle rider, but was a blue chip golfer, went to Oklahoma State. I would probably bet on him winning a major, whether it's next week at the Open or just in the next couple years. He feels like a guy, if he can maintain this level of play for the next 24 months, is a guy that's going to get over the hill. And speaking of a guy that's going to get over the hill is Ludvig Aberg. Guy's a real deal, man. He just, every single time that I go to my app and I say, God, he's 6 under after 12 holes. You watch his swing on television or on social media, he just looks like 22-year-old Dustin Johnson, Adam Scott mix. I don't mean his swing looks like Adam or Dustin Johnson. It's probably more Adam Scott. He's just very smooth. It just looks like I would want that to be my own swing. But just in terms of Dustin Johnson, looks like 6'4", good looking dude, probably does not have a problem with the women. I would imagine there are a lot of girls at Texas Tech who dated football players who now might be undrafted free agents or holding on for their NFL careers that are going to regret not being with this guy. I looked this morning. He's already made $600,000. He's been a pro for 4 tournaments. His last 3 tournaments, T24, T40, and honestly, the only reason he was T40 kind of blew up on the weekend. And last week he was T4. Here are his rounds the last 3 tournaments. 67, 65, 65, 70, 65, 67. Shitty weekend, 73, 72. Bounces back at the John Deere, 68, 64, 71, and then 63. You talk about a guy that can go low. The PGA Tour instituted this thing because of LIV, this college PGA Tour U, that the number 1 guy in college gets to immediately go to the PGA Tour and basically gets a free tour card for a year and a half. I got news for you. This guy is never going back to the Korn Ferry Tour. This guy is going to win. And whether it happens this weekend, I will have money on him. I doubt his first win comes at a major, but to me, he's got some of the fall rotation, and we don't even quite know how that's going to look. written all over him. I will bet this guy every single week. I didn't last week at the John Deere and was almost kicking myself on Sunday because he was like 22-1 by Thursday. You give me his number, 50-1 or longer, I'm putting that minimum $100 on it because he's a lock winner. He's too good. He's too talented. He hits the ball so far, so straight, putting, like any player not named like Tiger in his prime or Brad Faxon. Yeah, they're going to miss some putts. Who cares? This guy's ability to go low is pretty eye-opening. And honestly, 2 weeks ago when Rickie won, he was with Rickie in the second to last group and was playing pretty well. I think he doubled 14, then he bogeyed 15, then he had a stretch where he was basically 4 over in 4 holes, and it kind of derailed this tournament. But I couldn't be any more bullish on this players. I talk a lot about football, and I'm big on young players that it's clear. Like Nick Bosa, holy shit. I remember being around Khalil Mack, like this guy ain't missing. Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, pretty clear, pretty fast that these guys are going to be stars. I think this guy's shown in 4 weeks. It's harder in football because you see 4 games. You're like, show me a little bit more. You need a full season, maybe 2 full seasons. You see this guy play 4 tournaments. You're like, yeah, lock. He stays healthy. He's going to win several times. I don't know how many majors this guy's going to win, but he feels like he's got major winner written all over him. I saw Sobel comparing him a little to like Victor Hovland. I think that this guy has a chance to be just as good, if not better. And that's saying something. I think Hovland is a star. Hovland, like Ludvig, these guys are going to win major championships.